There are people the town decides to call crazy because it's easier than admitting they don't understand them. They had been calling Doña Refugio Salazar that for 20 years, since she began living alone on the edge of the town with her herbs and her cauldrons and her quiet conversations with things no one else saw. If you believe that loyalty and memory always find their way, subscribe to Tales from the Old Country and activate the bell. No one in San Jerónimo de la Loma, Michoacán, imagined that the young woman who arrived one March morning with swollen eyes and a sack of clothes was going to prove that they had all been wrong. Refugio did not have the appearance of an important woman. She was 71 years old, her back a little hunched from decades of bending over the griddle and over the plants in the garden, her white hair gathered with a black ribbon that had been colorful before time faded it. She lived in a little adobe house on the edge of the town, against the wilderness, where the dirt road became scrubland and the mesquites grew without anyone asking them to. She had a hearth, a sleeping mat, 3 clay pots of different sizes, and a black-covered notebook, old and thick, full of annotations in tight handwriting that no one had read because no one had gotten close enough to ask her for it. The town tolerated Refugio the way one tolerates what cannot be eliminated, with distance and with low-voiced comments. That she talked to herself in the garden, that her remedies were witchcraft, that the smell of herbs from her house reached the plaza when the wind came from the north. The women at the market changed the subject when someone mentioned her. The men shrugged. The children threw rocks at her from afar and then ran. But when someone in San Jerónimo had a fever that wouldn't break, or a pain the town doctor didn't know how to explain, or a baby that cried without stopping since dawn, sooner or later, someone would appear knocking at Refugio's door with their gaze lowered and their hat in hand. She always opened. She never asked who had spoken badly of her the previous week. She prepared what was needed, delivered it, and closed the door again without asking for further explanation. What she didn't know yet was that the young woman on her way was going to change the meaning of everything she had kept in that notebook for 20 years. Valentina Cardenas had been, until 3 weeks before arriving in San Jerónimo, the only daughter of the best-known landowner of the neighboring municipality, Don Prospero Cardenas, a man of lands and of name and of very little tenderness. Valentina was 23 years old and had grown up knowing that her worth in that house was measured by what she could represent in a family alliance. They didn't tell her with those words, but they taught her with every decision they made for her since she was old enough to understand. The fiancé was named Rodrigo Fuentes, son of a cattle rancher from Uruapan, and the engagement had been arranged between the two fathers in the parlor of the hacienda with coffee and mezcal and handshakes, without Valentina being present. They announced it to her afterward, the way one announces the weather, as something already decided in the face of which opinion changed nothing. For 5 months, Valentina prepared for the wedding with the obedience of someone who knows that resisting costs more than obeying. She learned the names of Rodrigo's relatives. She attended the dinners they indicated. She smiled in the photographs they asked of her. What she could not control was what she saw. And what she saw was Rodrigo Fuentes treating his father's farmhands with a cruelty so daily and so calm that it frightened more than anger, sending the wages of a young man docked for having arrived 10 minutes late, speaking of the women of the town with a contempt that did not lower its voice even in her presence. One afternoon, in front of Valentina and without any shame, Rodrigo said to the hacienda foreman, pointing at an old woman crossing the courtyard carrying firewood, "What's the use of that one anymore? Tell her to go find somewhere else to drop dead." Valentina did not say anything in that moment. But that night, while the ranch slept, she put her clothes in a sack, took the savings she had been keeping since she was 15 at the bottom of a sewing box, and walked out along the dirt road without looking back. Her father sent word to her the next day, through her cousin Aurelio, that if she left in that way, for him she had no daughter, that the dishonor was hers and that she should not set foot on the hacienda again, that the engagement with Rodrigo was broken because of her and that she would bear the consequences. Aurelio delivered the message with the face of someone who is carrying out an order he did not ask for and does not support. Valentina listened to him. She thanked him, and she kept walking. That cruelty so orderly, so without screams or blows, so administrative in its coldness, was what Valentina carried in her chest during the 3 days she walked and hitched rides and walked again until she finally reached the first town that seemed peaceful to her. San Jerónimo de la Loma had a church with a crooked bell tower, a plaza with a dry fountain, and a woman in the market who told her there was no inn, but that on the edge of the town lived a woman who sometimes let people who had nowhere to go sleep there. "Which woman?" asked Valentina. "The curandera," said the woman, and lowered her voice as if the name might hear her. Valentina walked to the little adobe house with the sack on her shoulder and her hope reduced to the strictly necessary to keep putting one foot in front of the other. She knocked. She waited. The door opened, and Doña Refugio looked her up and down with brown eyes that did not express surprise because apparently few things surprised that woman. "Come in," she said. "I already ate, but there are beans from the pot." Valentina entered. She sat on the wooden bench next to the hearth. She received the clay mug with the hot beans and held it with both hands because the heat felt good on her numb fingers. Refugio sat on the other side of the hearth and watched her eat without asking questions and without looking away, in the way that people watch who have seen many situations and have learned that questions can wait, but hunger cannot. "What's your name?" she said finally, when the mug was empty. "Valentina." "Valentina, what else?" A pause, then, "Just Valentina." Refugio nodded, as if that answer were perfectly sufficient. The next day, Valentina got up with the dawn because the smell of pot coffee woke her before light came properly through the glassless window that looked out onto the garden. Refugio was already up, in the garden, cutting branches of something green and fragrant that Valentina did not know how to name. The old woman taught her, without her asking. Epazote, Rue, Yerba Santa, Gobernadora. The names of the plants and what each one was for. How they were dried and how they were ground in the stone mortar she had in the corner of the kitchen. How they were boiled and at what temperature they changed color. That morning, Valentina prepared tortillas on the griddle, while Refugio dictated to her without looking at her, concentrated on her branches and her measurements. It was a routine that had its own rhythm, like things that have been done the same way for a long time. Valentina found her place in that rhythm without anyone assigning it to her. 4 days passed, then 7. Valentina began to accompany Refugio when the old woman went out to the wilderness to look for plants. She learned to walk slowly and to look at the ground. She learned that the huizache has thorns, but also a flower that's good for cough, and that the cypress next to the stream gives a bark that calms toothache if you chew it with patience. Refugio taught her without solemnity, like someone sharing practical information, not like someone imparting sacred knowledge. One afternoon, while they were arranging the dried plants in bundles that Refugio hung from the ceiling with twine, Valentina found the black-covered notebook on the table. She had seen it before, but had never picked it up. That afternoon, she picked it up because Refugio had asked her to look for the recipe for a cough syrup for a neighborhood child. The notebook was thick and heavy, with pages yellowed at the edges and tight handwriting in different colors of ink that indicated the annotations had been made in different eras. In the notebook, there was a folded paper that was going to change everything. Valentina noticed it because it stuck out between 2 pages at the back, newer than the rest, folded in 3 like a formal letter. She took it out carefully. She looked at Refugio. "You can open it," said the old woman without turning, as if she knew exactly what paper it was. It was a letter written in handwriting different from Refugio's, larger and more slanted, dated 22 years earlier. The letterhead at the top said, "Public Notary Number 4, Pátzcuaro, Michoacán." Valentina read in silence. She read it twice. Then she lifted her gaze. "This document is in the name of a woman named Refugio Salazar Cardenas," she said very slowly. "That's right," answered the old woman. "Cardenas," repeated Valentina. Refugio turned around. She looked at her with those brown eyes that did not express surprise, but that in that moment expressed something more ancient and more difficult to name. "Prospero Cardenas is my nephew," she said. "The son of my brother Leandro. I left that family when I was 18 years old because they didn't let me stay." She paused. "You are Prospero's daughter. I knew it from when you came in. You have your grandmother Consuelo's eyes." Valentina felt a chill rise up her back. The notarized letter was a document of property recognition, a plot of land on the outskirts of the municipality that had belonged to Grandmother Consuelo, and that Refugio had legally inherited but had never been able to claim, because Don Prospero and his brothers had asserted that the document did not exist. But it did exist. It had been kept for 22 years in the remedy notebook of a woman whom the town called crazy. The second person who validated the finding was Señor Eusebio Pantoja, a retired scribe who lived 2 streets from the plaza and who had been a witness to the original signature. He was 83 years old and had a precise memory for documents and a bad memory for names. But when Refugio put the paper in front of him, he recognized it immediately. "This is valid," he said, without hesitating a second. "I was there. I signed as a witness." What happened afterward reached the town before anyone could organize the story. That the crazy curandera had a notarized document. That the young woman who had arrived with a sack was the niece of the crazy curandera. That Don Prospero Cardenas had known about that document for 22 years and had let his aunt live on the edge of the town without saying anything. Don Prospero arrived in San Jeronimo on a Wednesday morning with his administrator and with the face of a man who comes to resolve a misunderstanding. He found Refugio and Valentina on the hallway of the little house, sitting with the remedy notebook on the table and the scribe's document next to it. "Aunt," said Don Prospero, with a voice that tried to be conciliatory and sounded like calculation. "This can be arranged within the family. There's no need to make a scandal." Refugio looked at him with a calm that came from 71 years of owing nothing to anyone. "It's already arranged," she said. "The document exists. The witness exists. The municipality has a copy. What you do with that is your business." Don Prospero looked at Valentina. Valentina held his gaze with a stillness he had never seen in her, a stillness that was not from her home or her upbringing, but from something she had learned in 7 days next to the hearth of a woman whom no one listened to. "You have nothing to do with this," he said to his daughter. "She has everything to do with this," said Refugio before Valentina could respond. "She is of this family, the only one who took the trouble to come." The administrator was looking at his papers. Don Prospero opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. "Never underestimate the quiet person who serves you coffee every morning," said Valentina in a low voice, looking her father in the eyes. "It was taught to me by someone you should have listened to 20 years ago. Don Prospero left without more words. Down the main street, with the administrator behind him, and the entire town, observing from doors and windows, with that discreet manner the people of small towns have of bearing witness without appearing to look. By noon, San Jeronimo de la Loma knew everything. And the way the market people greeted Refugio the next day was different. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just different. With that quiet respect that arrives when the truth takes a long time to settle, but finally finds its place. When summer came, the little adobe house on the edge of the town had the most orderly garden it had had in years. Valentina had built a wooden shelf next to the window for the dried plants, classified by name and by use in clay jars covered with cloth. The remedy notebook was on that shelf, in the center, with a new ribbon tied to its spine so it would not open on its own. Next to the notebook, the clay pot with the last herbs of the day was lit on the hearth, and the smell of epazote and hierba santa filled the room, with a warmth that no longer needed explanation. Refugio was sitting on her bench, carving the handle of something that was going to be a spoon. And Valentina was in the garden, cutting branches of rue with hands that already knew how to do it. Outside, on the dirt road that led to the little house, there were 3 women from the town waiting their turn. One with a baby in her arms, one with an empty pot, one with the gaze of someone who has gone days without sleeping well. The 3 of them waited without impatience, in the way one waits when one knows that what is inside is worth the wait. "You can come in now," said Valentina to the first. The woman entered. Refugio lifted her gaze, and the afternoon followed its course in San Jeronimo de la Loma with the same golden light as always. Only that day, no one in the town called anyone crazy. Sometimes the most desperate moments are not the end of something, but the door toward what was always waiting to be found. Kept in an old notebook, in a little house on the edge, in the voice of a woman whom no one listened to, because it was more comfortable not to listen to her. Has the person you least imagined ever turned out to be the one who needed you most? If this story reached your heart, leave your comment below. Tell us from what part of the world you're accompanying us this afternoon. Give us a like, subscribe to the Tales from the Old Country channel, and activate the bell so no story slips past you. Share this story with someone who needs to know that loyalty and memory always find their way. Until the next story. And they say in San Jeronimo de la Loma that even today, when someone passes along the dirt road on the edge of the town and smells the epazote and the hierba santa coming out through the glassless window, they know that inside there is someone who listens, and that, in this world, is no small thing.